Welcome to The Explainer. Whenever we think about the global economy, our minds usually jump straight to Wall Street, right? Bustling ports or maybe massive tech companies. But what if I told you that the most critical, complex, and high-stakes economy on Earth is happening right now, literally beneath your shoes? Today we're going to explore the hidden economy of soil. Dirt is so often just dismissed as, well, dirt. But as you'll see, it's actually the unsung hero of our planet, constantly balancing the books of life, death, and even our entire global climate.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Today we'll be looking at the superpowers of humus, Earth's giant carbon cycle, the carbon-nitrogen recipe, and finally, the future of soil fertility.
Starting with Section 1, the superpowers of humus, we are uncovering the unsung hero of the Earth.
To really understand soil, we gotta start with humus. And no, not the delicious dip for your pita chips. In soil science, humus, or organic matter, is that rich, dark material that gives healthy soils their deep, dark color. But this isn't just passive dirt. This dark matter is incredibly dynamic. It actually binds soil particles together to create good structure, which reduces bulk density and increases porosity. It even acts as a powerful buffer against acids and alkalis. It can temporarily latch onto heavy metal pollutants to literally clean contaminated water, and it drastically reduces wind erosion. It is, for all intents and purposes, a living, breathing, protective shield for the Earth.
Now, get this. The sheer scale of the nutrient power we're talking about here is just staggering. 90 to 95%. That is the amount of nitrogen supplied purely by organic matter in unfertilized soils. That's huge. Without humus acting as this massive nutrient storehouse, the natural plant life on our planet simply wouldn't have the nitrogen it desperately needs to survive and grow.
The benefits of humus are so vast, our source material actually lists 17 distinct functions, that it really helps to break them down into 3 rapid-fire domains. Physically, humus is basically a giant sponge. It increases water infiltration, improves drainage, and even lowers soil temperatures in the summer by acting as an insulator. Chemically, it's an absolute powerhouse, accounting for anywhere from 30 to 90% of the absorbing power of mineral soils. And biologically, it serves as the primary energy source for microorganisms. As these microbes decompose the organic matter, they actually produce antibiotics to fight off disease, along with vitamins and growth-promoting plant hormones known as auxins. I mean, it is quite literally the lifeblood of the ground.
Moving on to Section 2, Earth's giant carbon cycle. Let's zoom out for a second to the planetary level.
So ask yourself this, how does that dark, dense soil beneath us actually connect to the invisible, expansive sky above us? Well, the answer lies in the single most important exchange system on Earth.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. The connection relies on a continuous exchange system. Carbon dioxide sits up in the atmosphere. Through photosynthesis, that carbon is pulled down into organic compounds and green plants. Those plants are then eaten by animals, moving the carbon straight through the food chain. But whether it's coming from plants, animals, or decomposers in the soil, respiration is constantly pushing that carbon right back up into the atmosphere. It's a continuous, perpetual motion machine of life and death.
Let's trace the actual active journey of a single carbon atom. It starts off in the atmosphere, existing primarily as CO2. Then comes photosynthesis, where plants, algae, and some bacteria capture that CO2 and transform it into organic molecules like glucose, which is the absolute foundation of our food chain. Finally, we have respiration and decomposition. When plants and animals die, the decomposers, like the bacteria and fungi in the soil, break them down. They either release that carbon back into the air as CO2 or methane, or they store it deeply in the soil as organic carbon. Oh, and we absolutely can't forget the oceans. They absorb huge amounts of CO2. Through what's called the biological pump, marine organisms take up carbon and then sink to the ocean floor when they die, safely locking it away.
However, we do have to look at the human impact on this incredibly delicate system. Activities like burning fossil fuels, which suddenly releases carbon that's been locked away for millions of years, along with deforestation and certain agricultural practices, have really altered this cycle. These activities significantly increase the concentration of CO2 in our atmosphere, driving global warming and climate change. This is exactly why understanding the capacity of our soil to act as a reservoir for organic carbon isn't just some academic exercise. It is absolutely vital for understanding the future of our planet's climate.
All right, let's jump into Section 3, the carbon-nitrogen recipe. It's time for the microscopic math of life.
Let's zoom way back down. Down at the microbial level, life is entirely dictated by strict accounting. There's this rigid biochemical baseline, nature's magic ratio in soil humus. The average proportion of carbon to nitrogen to phosphorus to sulfur is exactly 140 to 10 to 1.3 to 1.3. Now, while the exact amounts of carbon and phosphorus can vary a little bit, the absolute most critical relationship for soil health is the ratio between carbon and nitrogen.
Check out this incredible spectrum here. Microbial tissues have a super tight ratio, just 6 to 12 parts carbon for every 1 part nitrogen. Soil humus sits perfectly right at 10 to 12. But as you move further out, the carbon load just explodes. Cereal residues and straws, they're sitting at 60 to 80. And forest wastes, a massive 150 to 500 parts carbon to just a single part of nitrogen. This huge variation is what actually drives the entire economy of the soil. When microbes try to break down something like forest waste, they're dealing with a massive carbon overload and a really severe nitrogen shortage.
And that right there brings us to the main ledger of the soil economy, mineralization versus immobilization. Think of mineralization as a nutrient gain. When the organic material has a C to N ratio of less than 20 to 1, the microbes have plenty of nitrogen. So as they decompose the material, extra nitrogen is released into the soil, becoming fully available for plants to use. But if the ratio is greater than 30 to 1, like with those heavy forest wastes, we get immobilization. Think of this as nutrient loss. The microbes are absolutely starving for nitrogen just to process all that extra carbon. So they actually tie up the available nitrogen in the soil, which results in a net nutrient loss for any plants trying to grow there. The microbes follow these super strict rules based entirely on temperature, moisture, and this precise C to N ratio.
Finally, Section 4, the future of soil fertility. Let's look at why this microbial math actually dictates our survival.
So the crucial takeaway here is that this carbon-to-nitrogen ratio isn't just a fun piece of trivia for a science test. It's the master switch of soil fertility. First off, it determines microbial activity and proliferation, basically whether the microscopic workforce multiplies or starves. Second, it dictates the exact speed and rate at which organic residues decompose. And third, it controls the net availability of crucial nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur that plants desperately need to survive. These three rules essentially decide whether a field yields a bountiful harvest or just leaves crops totally starving for nutrients.
But here's the really wild part. Despite all the chaos out there, despite the constant decay, the utilization of nutrients by plants, leaching from rain, and volatilization into the air, nature is always performing this incredible balancing act. The soil system naturally drives towards stabilization. The quantity of carbon drops as decomposition advances, and inorganic elements are released or lost. But through it all, the soil constantly tries to stabilize its carbon-to-nitrogen ratio back to exactly 10 to 1 or 12 to 1. That right there is the Goldilocks zone of the Earth's crust.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really hope you look at the ground just a little differently next time you step outside. The soil isn't just dirt. It's a vast, dynamic, global bank account. Down at the microscopic level, billions of microbes are constantly working to balance the ledger of carbon and nitrogen. And if they can't balance that ledger, the plants don't grow, the nutrients vanish, and ultimately the planetary climate cycle we all rely on begins to collapse. So, the next time you think about the Earth's climate, ask yourself, are we paying enough attention to the hidden economy right beneath our feet?